anytime you're thinking about what would other people want, actually what you're thinking about is how do I get money out of other people? Exciting based cool is a good direction for ideas. Most of the things that I create are based on solving problems. If you want to find problems, the fitness industry is a great place to go.
Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Kurkowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go. Dr. Pat Davidson's a PhD in exercise science, and he's the author of A Coach's Guide to Optimizing Movement, Rethinking the Big Patterns, and he's the creator of the Athletic Weapons program. I love Pat's approach to fitness because he challenges the status quo and he asks the tough questions on how we can be better and creating non-biased systemic models to help people. He describes himself as not an out-of-the-box thinker, but super analytical inside the box, seeing what is the best ways to keep progressing in the industry. And this is what I love about Pat's work, and I asked him to come on to dive into the current climate of fitness and how we can be better. All right, so with that, let's get right to it. If you like this episode, please rate and review it wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe. You can catch all new episodes that are dropped every single week. All right, thanks so much, guys. Let's get on with the show. All right, welcome back, everybody. Dr. Pat Davidson. It's good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, likewise. No, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, I've been seeing the work that you and my coach, my good friend Tyler, have been doing out with Athletic Weapon, and you guys are just crushing it out on the track. Awesome job, man.
Yeah, it shifts. Like that's Athletic Weapon is a concept I thought of during COVID. You know, I originally looked at it as something that could be a virtual product where people could train with me. A lot of people were doing stuff like that. Like you couldn't work with clients in a gym in New York City at that point in time.
Right.
And so it was like, all right, well, maybe I can come up with something that would be like I can have a guy come in and film me working out, and I can write a program for people and they can follow it, and, they can do everything I'm doing, and maybe they can do it. Like I originally thought it was going to be like live time. Like, hey, I'm going to send out a Zoom link and everybody can work out together and we can like talk to each other through Zoom while we're working out. And, interestingly, I thought that was going to be the big draw, this is going to be like for strength coaches and other like serious fitness people, like, hey, we'll have our own community that's virtual during COVID to train with live.
Right.
And then nobody showed up for the live ones, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, okay. Like I'm paying this dude to like video everything, and I'm paying him like more money than I'm making for this product.
Sure.
I don't need to video everything. Like I'll pivot and just make it a program. But the cool thing about it is like, it's my training program.
Right.
Which I think is actually pretty good, because it's like, dude, I care about my training more than anything.
Exactly.
So I'm going to make sure it's like really great. And, I'll be doing it at the same time. So it's like every now and then you think you have a really good idea. It seems to match up with science and evidence and blah, blah, blah. And then you go to do it and you're like, that just doesn't, you know what I mean? So it's like, it can be vetted as it's going along, and because I'm doing it with people, like I can give them that feedback of like, okay, here's what I'm experiencing. Maybe this is similar to what you're experiencing, but here's what I'm going to do about that, because this seems to be going sideways right now. Here's the course correction for it.
Right.
So, that's kind of that's sort of what it is. It's like, it's a very, very decent priced product. It's $35 a month for online coaching, which is really nothing. But the program is just one program. It's what I'm doing, but it's got years of programming now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's years of it. And really what it's turned out to be great for me is it's made me have to be super accountable. You know what I mean? Like I have to show up. Like I kind of can't, because it's my primary source of income. I can't really get hurt. I got to continue making progress. Like the better I do physically, the better the product does financially. So it's weirdly tied together like that. You know, and so I like enjoy that about it. Like it's, and I've gotten into the best shape of my life through this process. And it's kind of like everything I do, I record it. Like it's all in there. Like it's a very personal product for me.
Yeah.
Because it's
well, it probably keeps you, probably keeps you mentally focused in your own training as well, which is one of the most challenging things to do, is just to keep that mental focus, especially when you're really trying to push your body and really improve.
Yeah. I mean, it's just gone in a lot of directions, you know, but like when I first started it, I was like 235 pounds and like a lot fatter than I am now. And you know, it's gone through different directions of types of training where it's, you know, it's had points of just like general athletic development sorts of stuff. And then it's segued into like specific like track training, like with like sprint focused stuff. And it's segued and gone into like hypertrophy and really building muscle tissue in the gym. And so it's very interesting to follow it through the timeline, but you know, I started it. It's like almost 3 years older, I think, at this point in time as a program. There's 3 years worth of training history in it. So if somebody, because sometimes people are like, well, I think I'm a little out of shape to start. I don't know if I can really start. And I'm like, dude, I was out of shape when I started this thing. Like if you start literally in phase 1, day 1, you should be able to just go exactly along as I went along, and it probably will work out as long as you're super compliant to it. And I'll tell you, like I detail every single thing I'm doing nutritionally and like what's going on in my life and all those things. So you can kind of see like, you know, it's a holistic presentation.
Yeah. So you really built like a whole like personal health and fitness diary for people to follow and kind of track at their own time. I remember the virtual stuff. I remember, you know, me with my old team, we had a studio and we kind of did the same thing. We're doing live workouts, and then like everything you adjust. I mean, you think of a good idea and then you kind of see what works and what doesn't. And we kind of ran into the same thing where people weren't showing up to the live, because I think the big appeal to online or virtual is that you can do it on your own time. So it's more about having the program and knowing what to do, and then you can go do it on your own time rather than that, you know, fixed community. It's a good idea, but you know, on online, I know it's a little bit different. And I've seen the evolution of how you've developed the program and kind of, you know, built it up. And it's, you know, it's all based on a specific system of working in as well. So I've seen the results from it, which is really,
I mean, I've kind of like, and it's interesting, like now I kind of almost like accidentally got into good enough shape where, you know, I was sort of like, you know, I think I could probably do a bodybuilding competition. You know, and so like last year in the summer, like I was just like, wow, like I've changed enough to where it's like, I look at myself and I'm like, I feel like I could almost step on a stage. And so I decided like, screw it. I'm just going to take a year and I'm going to train for a bodybuilding competition. So that's sort of like where it currently is right now. And again, it's just my program. So it's sort of like, since right after Thanksgiving, it's purely just a bodybuilding preparation program. You know, I don't make the thing, like, it's funny. I don't subscribe to the concept that a lot of people do with the avatar for businesses. You know, who's your customer? I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't think most people know why they buy things. I really don't. Like, I think people like things that other people like. So it's like a weird chain reaction. Like people like things that are cool or maybe that they can't have or that seem desirable to other people. But I don't think that there's like this magical ingredient avatar concept that a lot of business models teach. I think that the only thing I've ever found successful is I have an idea and I say to myself, I really like this idea. And then I create it and I put energy into it. And it usually works. Every time I've ever tried to think like, I wonder what other people would like. It always sucks. It always sucks. So it's like, you know, I do think that for the most part, like because most of the time I don't really know what I want, but every now and then a little flash will come into my mind of like, ooh, I actually think this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
And then it's only an idea, and then you have to invest the resources and the energy into building it and cultivating it into a thing.
Right.
And then, if you continue to put effort and energy into something, it can grow. And then when you start to see it taking a form, you sort of like you're getting more evidence and information about like how to direct it into the future. But
right.
yeah, I've never. I don't know, like that. The model of like build an avatar and a demographic and what they want. I don't actually think that that's a good theory.
It's an interesting topic because, I mean, if you look at art, like if you ask most authors, like, where do ideas come from? Like they all say, I fucking hate that, question, because a lot of it, you have no idea where ideas come from. They just kind of pop up and then you play with it and you kind of figure it out. And then, sometimes it just grows from there. And oftentimes it's just shit, but it's like you get an idea and you figure it out and you work it out until eventually build another little step on it. All right. And then to build another little step. And I think it's like, because we're all like, when you create something, if you're creating it for others, then like you are other people. Exactly. It's like, if you do it, if you do it for yourself and you do like, all right, what would I like to do? What program would I want to follow? Then the right people are probably going to get attracted to that because you're putting your own, quote unquote passion into what you're doing.
I think that's really the big key too, because I think anytime you're thinking about what would other people want, actually what you're thinking about is how do I get money out of other people?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that's just like not the best creative angle to work from. I'm not even criticizing it from a moral perspective. I just don't think it's where good ideas emerge from. I think good ideas emerge from like purely like, this would be fucking cool. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, oh, that would be sick. I'd really like that, and then all of a sudden, like you can actually get excited about that. Like the actual excitement, like money is kind of cool, but it's sort of like I don't know, it's a weird pocket of like cool, it's like very greedy and grabby kind of cool, versus like other things are like, I don't know, like, jumping a dirt bike over a bunch of school buses is like, that's fucking cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like different avenues of it. And I think that fun and just like exciting based cool is a good direction for ideas.
Yeah. And the only way to create it in fullness is to really enjoy the process of it. Because if you don't, I mean, eventually you're going to stumble. If you're going to create something that is really going to appeal to people, like it's going to take work to put in. And if you don't have any joy behind it, I heard this quote about persona versus person. Like a persona is only worthy of praise, never love. And it's like, so if you are just acting out like who you think somebody else is going to like, then you're not getting love back from that. Like you're getting praise. Maybe it's a decent idea, but you're going for an external value. It's a money grab. You're trying to grab something from it, but that's short-lived because then that's going to go away and then you're looking for the next thing afterwards. It has no real foundational practice to it.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm gonna take that one, put it in my pocket, and pull it out later.
Yeah. Well, what I love, like what I really appreciate about the content that you put out is you're one of the guys that is really, it seems, looking to take the industry of health and fitness and making it better. It's like not resting on the laurels of, well, this is what we've done. This is what we've seen work. It's like, no, we can look at this from a science standpoint. We can look at it from a creative standpoint and see, can we make this better? And, from that too, like you've built these systems, you've built these pillars and stuff like that are, some are based on maybe some other things, but a lot of it is your own creativity and your own passion, which anything that happens like that, you might ruffle feathers with stuff and it gets some contradictory, but the message that I see of you is almost like you're a bit skeptical of like, okay, this, what has happened before? And it's like, how can we do to make this better? Is that fair?
I think I oftentimes tell people like, I feel like sometimes I get lumped into the category of being an outside the box thinker. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think I'm actually incredibly an inside the box thinker. I think I just analyze the box to a tremendously high degree. And I think that most of the things that I create are based on solving problems that are very obvious and glaring. And if you want to find problems, the fitness industry is a great place to go because there's just a lot of insane things, I think that the basics of nutritional science and exercise science are really solid, and the things that most people do in practice aren't grounded in those basics, and the basics can go into some interesting directions if you sort of follow them. But, the lack of a foundation in a lot of ways is what leads to a lot of like the craziness that I think exists in nutrition and exercise worlds.
Yeah.
Where, and look, like I always tell people, like, look, I'm never going to judge people on what their goal is. Different people have different goals. It's not my prerogative to like say that your goal in life is stupid. But once you tell me what your goal is, and then you start describing me your methods for getting from where you are now to that goal, now that's fair game for me to jump all over and identify the problems in, okay? And that's where I see a lot of the problems arise in fitness, and nutrition, okay? And I think that the worst parts of human tribalism and like cult type things emerge in these realms as well. Like nutrition's an easy one to pick on.
Yeah.
You have people that literally it's like religions over like veganism.
It's replacing it. Yeah.
Keto or whatever, you know what I mean? There's a million carnivore, paleo, this, that. And then people just think that they found like some magic recipe towards losing weight or gaining the right kind of weight or, whatever. It's like they just keep shuffling the deck and it's like just very confusing for people. And, it's almost like a lot of people just, there's like and the people that like put this information out oftentimes that's misleading, the magic bullet, magic diet, religious tribe sort of an experience. They oftentimes have significant followings. Like a lot of people are taking this information as gospel and using it to try to follow. And it's usually just like not good information,
right?
So just trying to like identify terrible ideas and present why it's a bad idea and what the actual, sort of what science or evidence seems to be indicating as the best approach is kind of what I'm usually after. I also will think critically about areas of science that maybe where science hasn't examined yet. And, I, for instance, am like, I think that significant changes in the shape of the skeleton happen as a result of long-term heavy resistance exercise. I think like just overall, like, and I'm not talking about thickness of bones or anything like that, like just sort of like the actual shape of the rib cage or shape of the pelvis, I think changes. And then you move differently.
Right.
I think that it's like, you can sort of tell like, oh, that guy has been lifting weights a long time.
Right.
By the way that he moves, like the way that you can sort of spot somebody that's super trained by the way they walk, the same way you'd be able to spot like an ostrich by the way it walks versus a giraffe by the way, you know what I mean? Like the shape of their skeleton sort of determines the way that they move through space. And it's like long-term heavy resistance trained athlete moves different than regular person, and I think a lot of that is just like remodeling of the actual morphology of the skeleton. And that's something where it's like people have come after me and they're like, well, where's the evidence to support these claims? And I'm like, nobody has done the research. Like it's an idea at this point in time. Like I would love people to do the research and sort of see if we can see, because I just look at it, I'm pretty sure that like the whole rib cage is usually a little bit more round in people that don't lift weights, and it gets more flattened front and back and sort of widens out with people that just lift a lot of weights, which helps because it doesn't let you rotate as easily or side bend as easily,
Right.
which you don't want to do if you're lifting weights and squatting and pressing. It's really bad if you turn while you're squatting. So your body just makes adjustments so that you avoid with least cost the movements that you don't want to do. So it's, but to me, that's like, that's the differentiation. Typically, like I'm a scientific materialist philosopher. You know what I mean? That is the branch of philosophy that I subscribe to. I think it's the best story that we have as a species and the best method of thinking we have as a species. But at the same time, there are some topics that have not been explored by science. And the beginnings of science in any area is to identify the areas that have not been explored by science. Mm-hmm. And once you identify those things, now you say, hey, let's measure this shit and let's track it over time. And then let's try experiments on it and see what happens. And now we'll really understand this thing. But once science digs its teeth into a topic and it gets to, pretty advanced levels of analysis, dude, you can rest assured on what it's saying on a topic. Right. And for the most part, like, I think nutrition's kind of there. All the information from a science perspective you'd ever want is there. I think that people like Lane Norton and Mike Israetel crush it in terms of what they're presenting, because their models are based on really synthesizing tremendous amounts of science in these areas to give you a game plan that is as best case scenario as we can get right now for helping people towards their body composition goals via food in their life. Mm-hmm. So it's as far removed. Science is its own religion, but it's probably the one religion that realizes it's a religion and is self-aware to a degree more so than any other religion. Right. So I think that there's a bias, but a more self-aware bias than any other branch of thinking and approach towards things.
Yeah. On the fitness side, like, what specific areas do you think we're really lacking on the science behind? Like, are there specific ones that you've seen?
Well, I think just overall understanding like movement, like the actual essence of movement. Like we can determine how to move more stuff or how to get bigger or how to increase like we can kind of measure the adaptations. Like, has this person's heart gotten bigger? Has this person laid down more capillaries? Has this person acquired more mitochondria? Do they have more thickness in the trained muscles? What protocols actually lead to these adaptations? You're not going to get much bigger quads by running marathons. Right. You're going to get that by, progressive overload resistance training for the legs, but I think like at a fundamental level, like sort of like what drives the actual origins of movement, I think are it's like, it's so deep that it's like, you don't even realize how deep that is. Right. And, we kind of have like sliding filament theory stuff with muscles and understanding that muscles kind of transmit forces through tendons that attach to bones and that bones rotate around joints. And that's kind of how we observe human movement. But in some ways, like, hey, why is this person, when they move, a really beautiful fluid mover? Like, why does it look so good to watch Michael Jordan play basketball versus like, why is this accountant so clunky trying to play basketball? Right. Like, is it just the length of their legs relative to the length of their torso? Probably not. Is it their range of motion? Probably not. Yeah. Is it, what is it? Like, what allows for the expression of what you would look at and say, that's good versus, ugh, Yeah. And I think that that's like the oldest inquiry that we have as a species. like going all the way back to like, Socrates versus sophists within Greek philosophy, where the sophists were very interested in discovering the good. And Socrates essentially said that you cannot define good, and therefore you cannot begin to explore it. And it's sort of the division between quantitative versus qualitative branches of measurement and science. And qualitative still attempts to be quantitative with paper and pencil tests and scoring things and blah, blah, blah. But it's just such a hard question of what's good and how do I essentially gather good? Like you can attempt it yourself, like define good.
It's so subjective. Like it could be based on the anecdotal experience of what you've done before. And yeah, that's interesting what you said about the origin of movement. Cause like you could teach someone a specific basketball move for a year and they'll still look different than when Michael Jordan does it. And I think we've probably chalked that up to, just genetically they're more gifted and graceful in their movement, but there's probably a deeper reason behind that.
Yeah. Like what is it about it? Like what is it? When you burrow down into it, it's a hard topic to actually talk to and address and bring up. But once you get to the point where you're like, this person is good at this thing and this person's not good at this thing, and all you have to do is look at it and it, you're like, yeah, okay, I've definitely seen that. Like go to a track and watch people run it. And like most people, you're like, ooh, that's bad. Ooh, that's bad. Ooh, that's bad. And then you see one person go by and you're like, wow, that's really good.
There it is. Yeah.
Okay. Like what is it? What is it? And so people try like, hey, we're going to measure all your joints and we're going to try to just see like, okay, like do good movers have like this number of degrees of motion at the hip in this direction and that direction? And it's like, sometimes.
Yeah. The perfect scientific answer. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
And then like, or just like, well, how strong does this person need to be to do this thing good? Or it's very tricky. It's like, why is this person such a good soccer player? Can we break it down? Like, how fast do they run? How high do they jump? And sometimes it matches. It's like, you kind of know like, well, it needs to reach this threshold level. I think that I know like Chasm Hansen, who's he's with N1 Education. He's got this whole concept on thresholds that I think is very interesting. Like things need to reach a threshold, and once they're in that threshold, like it's good enough in some ways. And so I think there's just like this collection of thresholds potentially that exists. And like when it's a critical variable that needs to get into that threshold, as long as it's within that threshold level, it's okay. And then you're just trying to figure out what are the other ones. It's a bit like trying to fly an airplane. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to overcome gravity and get it to like soar through the air. And like there's a whole bunch of things you need to be able to accomplish that. Like you need an engine that can create thrust, and you need wings of a certain length and weight and a hull and aeronautic like things and manipulation of space. And it's crazy. You know what I mean? And you could say like, well, I think it's, if we just make the engine more powerful, it'll be better. But then you make the engine more powerful and it weighs too much and it throws off the balance of the whole system. So it's like, it really is like appreciating all of the interplay between the subsystems and the balance, like the degree of ratios between those things that ultimately feed into an end product being able to do tasks. And like, to me, that to me is like the most fascinating stuff. Like isolated concepts are cool and difficult to understand on their own, but the integration of concepts into a holistic presentation is to me what I think it, like most of the things that we actually like, the sports we like to watch and the activities we like to do, and distinguishing between people that are really good at those things and people that aren't good at those things. And you try to just base it on like an isolation of a specific concept, and it never seems to quite pan out.
Right.
And so if we can begin to kind of, like, I'm more interested in the conduction of the orchestra as opposed to the individual string frequencies.
Like the horn, yeah.
Exactly. So I do think that is really kind of like the level of science that I would like to, like, that's what I like. That's like, some people are just like into certain things. And I'm into the holistic model, which is a very challenging concept. Like, some people are like super into like one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Like, I'm just obsessed over this one piece. And I'm like, well, yes, but if you consider this piece being angled this way, it changes the orientation of everything else. I'm like, so that's my jam.
Yeah, that's interesting. The orchestra analogy, because it seems, especially in the fitness industry, like we have a lot of subsystems. We have like really good horn players and really good guitarists, and we have a lot of people who are very good at that. But to put it all together into one system and make them flow together, that's where it's, because the horns want to play louder because they're really good at that, and it's like, and then the guitar wants to do a solo, and it's kind of a very similar thing there. But kind of bringing you back when you talked about just the fundamental kind of baselines, it seems like why does it seem like we miss that a lot? Maybe with like a lot of coaches, it's like, because it seems like it's very self-evident, we kind of understand it, but is it we're not maybe drilling that hard enough to really understand it, or we want to get into more anecdotal or kind of arbitrary kind of conversations?
I think it's because it's not simple and it's not linear. So it's like, human beings, think about the most successful movies that ever get made from a box office perspective. They're usually very simple stories. They have the same character arc, same plot line, sort of a thing. It's like, oh, this is going to be a summer blockbuster. And you're like,
Star Wars again.
Yeah, dude. It's like, I could have predicted how this was going to go before I ever saw it. You know what I mean? But we love simple stories that have sort of flat lines and things like that, versus like, deeper things is a little bit more, I don't know, an acquired taste. It's like, it's not for everybody. You know what I mean?
There will be blood. Like, it's got an acquired taste. Yeah.
That movie's crazy.
That movie is crazy.
The movie is so crazy. Like, it doesn't get talked about enough. That bowling alley scene at the end is just like, what did I just watch? What did I just watch? Like, I'm so uncomfortable and it's over. Like, I can't go back to my day now. It's like,
very acquired taste. It's not the simple, the good guy doesn't win at the end.
And I think also, like, there's just like the tendency for people and all creatures, like, you're going to like things that you're good at a lot. Like, like, you'll just develop an affinity towards things that you have success in, and it just reinforces that pattern. And you'll just go deeper and deeper and deeper into that area of your life and exploring that thing. And like, over time, people become less dimensional in some ways. You know what I mean? It's like, if you think about children, they're sort of interested in everything all at the same time. You know what I mean? They're distractible. They're like, oh, a flower, oh, a car, a wagon, and then as you get older and older, like the oldest people, they basically do the same thing every day, and they tell you the same story over and over again, and they eat the same food over and over again, and they don't like it when things change. So it's sort of like, you'll do more of what's easy and comfortable and that you end up being good at over time, until that's all you do. And why? Because it's simple, it's reproducible, it's manageable, it's easy, all that sort of stuff. But it's kind of like, hey, if you're flexible and that's your natural inclination, you're probably going to end up being like a yoga teacher. If you're super strong, you're probably going to end up being a power lifter. And then, because that becomes like your identity, you focus on it and you believe that's the solution for all things. And it just reinforces itself with confirmation and all that sort of stuff. And it takes a lot of energy to explore outside of that domain that you've kind of fallen into. And it's uncomfortable. You're going to have to deal with people that have different viewpoints and styles of talking and presenting. And it's exhausting, but it's sort of like that is the area where growth can happen on an individual level. And it probably also just like makes I'm okay with being wrong most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I know I'm usually wrong, I still find that I'm usually more correct than most other people. But I know I'm still wrong. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of people, like, I think that's a good place to get to. Like, actually getting there. Like, I don't think I'm right, but I think I'm probably better than what you're saying.
Yeah. Do you realize you're wrong faster? Is that like kind of a big thing?
Or it's like, I know I'm wrong, but it's still probably good enough to move in the direction I'm trying to go in.
Okay. Yeah. So there's still some steps that can be made forward.
Yeah. Like, it's not perfect, but nothing's perfect. And it fits inside the logistics of the current conditions that I'm dealing with right now to be the most streamlined approach, even though it's still the best. It's only the best thing I can think of, which doesn't mean it's even that good. It's almost like I can appreciate the fact that people, 200 years ago would have been like, well, if you want to get somewhere fast, horse is the answer. And it's like that's the end of their potential scope of thinking about travel speed. You know what I mean? That is terminal travel velocity. Versus now you're like, obviously I'm going to take this Tesla.
I got a car.
That's
Exactly.
Rocket, and then, but at some point in the future, that's going to be a joke. Like, everything becomes a joke in the future as to what you think is best case now, And so it's sort of like, this is best case for now, but it certainly should not be what I think of as like the terminal point of all approaches towards this thing.
Right. Yeah, it is. What's interesting with it, I mean, we can all just kind of fall into that trap, right? Of like what feels good for us, like it moves well. And then, okay, now I'm going to teach everybody what I'm doing in this. But if as a coach and to really gain that, I remember you used an analogy of like the McDonald's cashier that I loved, of like, if you can get the fundamentals down, you can be like a really efficient McDonald's cashier. And if you don't know what it's talking about, it kind of like sounds like, weird, but realizing you can find all the buttons of what you need to do really fast. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Yeah,
for sure. When I'm teaching the certification model that I have, Rethinking the Big Patterns, it's like, it's got the 7 pillars of that I think approximate understanding and manipulating movement as well as you can, and directing movement towards accomplishing goals. So it begins by just, I have a classification system that's based on, like, I think that there's 13 fundamental motor patterns that are the big trainable motor patterns. And it's locomotion, change of direction, throwing, triple extension, breathing, core exercises for the pelvis, core exercises for the thorax, squatting, hinging, horizontal pressing, horizontal pulling, vertical pressing, vertical pulling. I think that actually captures everything you can do in fitness. And I haven't had anybody present anything outside of those 13 motor patterns that are trainable. You know what I mean? I'm like, I think that potentially dance is a motor pattern, but it's sub-motor patterns expressed in a larger motor pattern.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not something that I know how to train for fitness-based gains. That's like, it's some things are outside of the domain of fitness movements that are guided towards accomplishing physiological change for directed goals. Like, you're dancing to dance to be a better dancer. And it gets mixed with like Zumba classes for like just general movement and health.
Right.
But it's like, no one is like, yeah, I'm trying to get in the best aerobic shape of my life. I'm going to dance for the next 6 hours to accomplish that. It's like, nobody does that. It would be like, well, I'm going to use, running and swimming and cross-country skiing, you know, something like that. And those that all just fall under the general domain of locomotion, you know. So
right.
like you've got 13 patterns that you can select from. And then there's like quantitative side to it. So inside quantitative stuff, you've got load, velocity, and duration. And so you can load things heavy, moderate, light. You can go fast, slow, or moderate. And you can do things for a long time, a short time, or a moderate time. Mm-hmm. And I just drop down like actual number bumpers to differentiate those places from each other. But all those things are geared for me to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to choose squat pattern, and I'm going to do it with moderate load for moderate velocity for moderate duration. And based on the numbers of that, you kind of have like a idea of what the constraints would be around this activity now. Okay.
Right.
And to me, it's like, if I own a gym, I want all of my employees working on the same conceptual model of what to choose, how to select activities. And so if I'm the owner and I've got clients, I can build the bumpers around like, here are the motor patterns that you're going to use for this client that you're training. And here's the loading zones, and here's the duration zones, and here is the velocity zones. So that now the employee just simply has to follow this thing. Like, up first is going to be hinge activity that is going to be done with light load for high velocity for moderate duration. And then it's kind of, well, what would that be? Well, it's a kettlebell swing.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so that's sort of like the path that it goes down. I don't really want young employees making gigantic wholesale decisions on their own. I want them to paint between the lines, and this is my lines that I build for them, so that they have some freedom of being able to choose a tool inside the constraints that I've built for them. Because sometimes you're working in a gym and you're like, well, the next exercise says machine pec deck.
Yeah.
But there's 3 people over on the pec deck, so I can't do it.
Right.
And it's like, well, look, like if we categorize it and you understand that there's like, this is the concept that you need to train for this person, there's a couple different options. And that way, like if you're in different gyms, or if you're in, you know, whatever it's 5 o'clock and there's very little equipment available and you're kind of mixing and matching, like you're still providing the dose of the appropriate modality for the outcome that we're looking to achieve. You know, that's kind of the idea. And so to me, it's sort of like, if my employees literally just understand just that like, here are the motor patterns and here are the quantitative zones, and they just punch those things in, even if like the technique's not that good of the client,
right?
Because of the disbursement of the activities, I'm probably going to be able to get a decent outcome that's low risk, just simply through the categorical design and that level of decision making being simplified for that population.
This is what I love about it, because it's a system like this, because I think so much with fitness, which still is kind of a little wild westy in many ways, like we're all like, a lot of people are doing their own thing, and yeah, I've got the fundamentals down. And I know this from when I started. I mean, I spent a couple $100 on a NASM certification and took a test, and all of a sudden I was a personal trainer and I could take on anybody at that time. And thinking back on that, like I didn't know anything about how to train, how to program, really. Fortunately, I had really good mentors that helped me kind of put a system together. But I think this is where I think we miss in some ways, of having a system of how we select what we're actually doing with people. Because we go so quickly into, well, this is what I've done before, so this is going to work for, Grandma Susan, who's, 70 years old, who wants to do this. It's like, there's a centralized system where, regardless of who it is, as whether it's an athlete or whether it's, general population, having some sort of centralized system where we can pick what's the best thing for each person. That's where I think it's been missing. And this seems like it's a pretty good solution.
Yeah, and honestly, like it kind of goes back to some of the things I was talking about, like the emotional biases and the religious sorts of concepts that exist in fitness. I mean, fitness has like, you can ask someone that's like been working out, they're like, oh, what are you into? They're like kettlebells. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, and it's almost like they have this religious reverence for kettlebells. And like, if you're their client,
it's my people.
What you're going to do. It's like, hey, we're going to do swings and get-ups and, windmills. And that's like, you didn't even know that as a consumer, you didn't know that you were getting signed up for this in some ways. But you just happened to go to the gym and get paired with the kettlebell person, and now you're the kettlebell client. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, that's kind of crazy. It's like, it's literally just one tool in a gym full of tools. And is it the best tool for the specific outcomes you're looking for this individual? Like, I just like to remove all the biases, like I've competed in different strength sports. Like I've competed in strongman and gotten to a high level, but I don't think strongman style training is a great style for most people. But you could make a compelling case like, well, yeah, but you got to carry groceries in a suitcase and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, yes, but do I need to do
an Atlas stone?
Yeah. Like, am I going to have my clients do a Husafel stone carry in the gym? Like, yeah, it's hard. It sucks. But like, the person's primary goals were body composition related. And that's like, that's sort of like taking the scenic route that's going to be 8 times longer to get to the destination. And in this case, the scenic route's also going to bruise the shit out of your forearms and like just suck. It's going to suck for no reason. And like some people are like, yeah, but carries are fun. I'm like, oh, what planet are you living in? Like, first of all, like if you're doing them hard enough, anything that you do hard enough ceases to be fun. Okay. Whatever it is that you thought was fun, it's only because it wasn't heavy enough or you weren't going fast enough or you didn't do it long enough. If it's an overload stimulus, which is required to create an adaptation, it literally means in and of itself that it ceases to be fun because you're like, oh God, this sucks. And like fill in the blank. It sucks because it burns so bad. It sucks because it's so heavy. It sucks because it feels like it's pulling the muscles off. It sucks because I'm so out of breath that I feel like I'm like, It sucks because I'm so hot. I feel like I'm going to combust into flames. Like if you're going to create an adaptation, it's got to be hard enough. And that never feels fun.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I really do think like I'm all about trying to remove bias. How unbiased can I get? And it's almost like if I create the most sterile, categorical, almost industrial monster like thing that I can think of, it's as unbiased as possible. But it's also like a big blank slate so that you can still work within your individual human areas and fill in the thing as you feel comfortable coaching. It's like, I'm not telling you exactly what kind of squat you have to do. It just, in this particular case, it's like a bilateral stance, sagittal plane squat that is going to be moderate load, moderate velocity, moderate duration. Okay. What are you comfortable coaching? What implements do you have at your gym?
Right.
As long as it fits inside that concept, which can be defined quantitatively, then have at it.
Yeah.
But it's still, it's to me, it's the same thing as just creating like drug classifications from pharmacology. Like, hey, this is going to be a barbiturate. Okay. And then there's different kinds of barbiturates that might make sense for a given person, or like an amphetamine or like a serotonin reuptake inhibitor or whatever it is. Like there's different specific drugs inside of a class that might make sense for a specific patient. Or it's like, hey, we're in Brazil, so we have more access to this kind of drug because it's manufactured here versus we're in China. So it's like we have more access to this thing. But the category defines the general effects of the drug. And I look at exercises as drugs, quite honestly. And it's like, if I dose this amount of drug, it should create these effects, generally, roughly speaking. If I underdose it, then nothing happens. If I overdose it, I get bombed with like bad side effects. If I find the sweet spot, I should have these predictable effects. And then if I understand the broad spectrum of the different kinds of drugs, then I create this ultimate sort of like pathway and adaptation directionality.
Yeah. I think that comparison to like pharmacology is beautiful there, because you don't just prescribe a drug because we like it, or it's like we know more about it than others. It's right. What is, who is the person in front without bias in there. And I think that's a beautiful just kind of umbrella of everything we've been talking about, is just eliminate the bias. Because when you do that and you really do that well, then you're really looking at the person in front of you who is looking for help without what you think you've done with the person before and what's seen really good. You can actually break down exactly who the person is in front of you. And then, make it hard. It's not going to be easy, but you're actually going to give them the results they're looking for. And then you get buy-in, and then we're changing the world a little bit at a time.
That's it. It's really hard. Like, I mean, every person is guilty of subconscious bias. Mm-hmm. You can't help it. I'm biased. You're biased. We're all biased. Some of your biases you're aware of, others you're completely flying, they're under the radar. And, that's why I trust algorithms more than I trust my own mind. Mm-hmm. So if I follow diet apps that use algorithms with AI, because it's not going to make an emotional decision, Like, I could have a big weekend where I'm inactive and I have a huge gain in fluid weight. And then I could get to Monday, weigh myself and be like, oh no, mm-hmm. and like make radical changes. And versus like an algorithm is like, no, wait, just hold, pause, just follow the plan. And, after 4 days back following the plan, all the fluid kind of washes out of the system. You're right back to where you were. Versus if you make the radical emotional decision, you just screwed up, a ton of potential directionality. I think that as a species, we are very apt to making very large, drastic, short-term emotional decisions that affect the big picture in ways that we can't anticipate from a problematic perspective. And, for me, like, I feel like we're in kind of in an age where people feel that their emotions are almost omnipotent in some ways. You know what I mean? Like, your emotions are kind of whimsical and momentary, and
they're scattered.
Like I would not necessarily, emotions are one piece of input, one piece of information to consider when making a decision. And in the past, in like the savannah, they were probably more important because life was simpler. Now life is so complicated in the modern world, mm-hmm. that reliance on your emotions is probably an outdated methodology to really guide you from like a behavior and decision-making perspective. So I'm not saying ignore them completely, but I am more saying like, from my experience, my emotions and my emotional reactions have led to tremendous problems in my life. Like most of my bad decisions and bad moves that I look back at, I'm like, oh, that was like me getting carried away with emotions. I was angry, or I was jealous, or I was this, or this. And I made this move, this unilateral decision that was guided purely by emotion. And I really fucked myself over. I wish I could have been patient and waited it out and gotten to a place where I wasn't so emotional before I made my decision, mm-hmm. And so that's really hard to do for, one of the reasons why I think it's the case for movement is that as an animal, like the human is the only animal where the motor cortex has usurped the control over the skeletal muscle. Most other animals, their skeletal muscle is controlled almost completely by their basal ganglia, which is a more, old brain, hind brain part of the brain. With human beings, the descending neuron tracts come much more from the motor cortex than from the basal ganglia. We still have basal ganglia tracts that go down directly to alpha motor neurons that control skeletal muscle, but we have cortical control over our muscles to a much greater degree than any other animal. And when you get into the cortex of the brain, that is it's the modern, it's the thinking part of the brain, but it's also an emotional part of the brain, and so we attach emotions and feelings to movement more than other animals do. I always say, lions don't have Lion Sports Center for watching other lions take down a gazelle, right. Where they're like, wow, dude, you see the way Larry pulled that 360 and took that gazelle right off his man, hit that thing like Ray Lewis, bro. Look at let's watch it again, and versus we have all these things oh my God, did you see Vince Carter in the dunk contest? Yeah. Stuffed his whole arm through the basket. That was unbelievable. The 360, he's the best dunker ever. Yeah. And then somebody's like, no, dude, Michael Jordan's the best dunker ever. And they're like, no, he's the overrated man. Yeah. He couldn't even beat Spud Webb.
Holy shit, that's so true. Yeah.
And so it's kind of but it leads you to this idea of where people are like, oh, that's that bad exercise. Oh, that's the bad way to do it. That's the good way. And it, we're kind of getting back to this whole, what is the good and the Socrates versus the Greek. So, I mean, I do love this stuff, just from a theoretical and a conceptual basis. But to me, I had to dig this deep to get to the point where it's kind of damn, how can I get to a point where I just divide from a categorical standpoint and do my best to ensure that things are reaching a threshold of good enough from an execution standpoint so that we get what we want, and I don't overburden people with the analysis of the movement from a cortical perspective. Can I take that? How much can I take it out of the picture and make it almost like machine learning? To me, machine learning is faster, it's less bogged down, it's more the probabilities of successful outcomes from following a strategy are higher. It's largely because it's not going to be as reactive and judgmental as human intelligence.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a perfect that's just a perfect description of that, of how easily we get our emotions attached to these things. I didn't know the difference with it. I'm a little bummed there is no Lion Sports Center, because that would be absolutely freaking awesome.
Lion Sports Center would be awesome.
That'd be great. But no, going back into it, taking all the emotions out of it and, putting it into a system like this, I think is where we all need to be, specifically as coaches. You need to learn this system, before we get into the creative side of stuff of trying to flow, kind of getting into the dance, even dancers, before you get into the great dances, you need to learn the fundamentals. You need to get on the bar as a ballet dancer and need to learn the positions without emotion behind it. And then you build that in afterwards. So yeah, I think this is so powerful.
And I'll tell you, I know we were going to talk about the Exercise Science University stuff. That's sort of why I started that is, I've been working with enough coaches and teaching enough seminars and doing mentorships and things like that. And it was kind of I don't have the same common starting place of what guides my thinking compared to where a lot of other people are at. And, I realized I've developed some very good coaches that are in the field at this point in time, and they're doing some pretty cool things. And I think about it and it's well, the reason is because I was still a professor at a university at that point in time, and they took a bunch of classes with me, and I was able to have multiple semesters with students. to build them from the ground up. And so it was like, I think that that's probably the more appropriate product to help people with right now than even some of the previous ones that I put out, because it was like I almost skipped the, like what you're talking about, the foundations. Because sometimes I feel like people are looking at me like, why are you making these decisions? And I'm like, well, because of all of these things that I considered, you know, and it's like, but they're not aware of those things. And I'm just sort of, so Exercise Science University is something that I put together as like, start from the beginning of everything, you know, like what are the absolute fundamental concepts that should be your baseline? And then if we start in the right place and we build the foundation, now you can really begin to see why the things out here that I'm trying to teach, that I get, the things that I get excited to teach, why are they exciting to teach? But it's, people are kind of like, why do you, who cares about this?
Yeah.
Like, well, because of all of these other things that you have to consider in the first place. And so I think it's just, it's funny where it's, you know, I haven't taught a lot of this stuff in about 10 years, but going back and reteaching the basics with 10 years of learning since I've done it is cool for me, because I can be like, okay, so here's why this is important. Like, you might be looking at this lecture and seeing like it's a biomechanics lecture on moment arms, but the reason that it's important is because of this stuff that's happening in the research right now. And this is like on the frontiers of what we're doing for these particular you know, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, it's cool to see how that's playing itself out.
That's awesome. Oh, we'll have to do a part 2 here so we can go into the details of Exercise Science U. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I'll tell you, it's another one of those ones where it was like, it just kind of popped into my head randomly almost like, oh, I think this is a good idea. And then I started thinking about it more and more, because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of ideas that just pop into my head seemingly out of nowhere. And then I kind of evaluate them. I'm like,
well, do I want to put the bandwidth into it? Like, am I really excited? I mean, that's kind of ideas just come from anywhere. And then something usually like it sticks with you for a little bit more than just a moment. And you're like, okay, let me play with this a little bit more. Yeah.
And this was one where it was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm my own cross-examining lawyer inside my own head. And I kind of did all the cross-examination. And I was like, no, it's still a good idea. Like, I kind of have to do this one.
Yeah. It's so important. I mean, that's kind of the process, that like almost the skill of thinking, right? Is like to have an idea and actually play devil's advocate with yourself and be like, because it's so easy to say like, oh, this is a great freaking idea in there, and not have the other person, really, is it? It's like going in, and it's like to do that with your own mind. Like that's a talent. It only comes from just doing it over and over again, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, people say a lot of things like, oh, you know, you shouldn't be too overly critical inside your own head. Like, you know, at least in like psychology, they talk about like your inner critic. And a lot of times it gets a bad rap in some ways, you know, like, because I'm a super critical person. I am fully aware of that. Like, my initial reaction to everything is no.
Right.
No. Like, somebody comes to me with something, I'm like, no shot. Okay. Yep. And then I have to actually work backwards from no to where I can be like, still no. Actually stronger no. But every now and then I'm like, you know, I've been thinking about this one. Yeah. And actually, I think it's a maybe. You know? Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Well, it's the difference between being critical, right, and just berating yourself. I think a lot of people, we just berate ourselves and say, oh my God, why can't you do this? And we just talk now. Being self-critical, and I mean, that's self-awareness. Like, you know, if you, it's kind of weird if you're just a person, I'm freaking great, and like everything I do is awesome without that other side of it. Like, you're kind of a little.
I've definitely met those people though. And oh my God, it's really tough.
You can only fake smile for so long with those people, and until you're like, I need to get out of this room. So Yeah. Dude, Pat, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I want to be respectful of it. Thank you so much. Dude, I really love everything that you're putting out. And I'd love to have you back on it, dive more into the university if you'd be open, and that'd be awesome. So
absolutely.
Yeah. If people want to check out more of what you're doing, keep up with everything that you're working with, what's the best place that they can go to?
Probably the best place, like Central Hub, is probably Instagram, and then you can kind of go link in bio. Somehow some people still don't understand like the link in bio concept. You know what I mean? I'll still get messages and people will be like, how do I find this thing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you go to the bio link and it takes it to all the things, like, but so yeah, Instagram link in bio basically brings you to everything that I do. And then, just there's various things.
Awesome, man. Perfect. Thank you so much, dude. Listeners, thank you so much. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.